Okay, and we are back. Welcome, world, to another episode of Leadership Lessons. It is episode 4. We're literally rattling through these, you know.
I know.
I'm very excited. Like, I feel like we do one of these.
The more we
every
do, the
single
more
day.
I want to do.
And I know, I'm hungry. And do you know what? This is the third episode in a row where we've had like guests, and this is exciting. You know what I'm saying? And you're going to be seeing more of this. Of course, I am your host, Mr. Louis Howell. I'm with the man himself, Mr. Keshav Bhatt, and we are joined. This needs a moment. We are joined by two amazing guests. We've got Jessica and Soumyadip, who are going to introduce themselves in just a second. But guys, I want to thank you for joining us on this episode. And we have got a massive, massive topic. We're going to be talking about, as you know, the theme this month is politics. So we're going to be talking a bit more about this election. But of course, for you guys that have got that international perspective, we would love for you to feed in the comments as well about what you think about the current political situation going on in the UK and how it compares to you guys around the world. So I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves to our amazing audience, because I know they're excited to see you too.
Hi, my name's Jessica Devine, and I'm here ready to talk about investment and impact investment in the field in which I work. So I'll be talking a bit about that.
Hi, I'm Soumyadip. I would love to share all the mistakes I've made, because I keep making all of them, and hopefully I can help.
And you run quite a few businesses, I hear.
Yeah, run a few businesses. Been in public sector as well. So just share my experiences and hopefully help people make less mistakes.
Hey, we all make mistakes.
Speaking
man.
of which,
I think mistakes are a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
which is a nice way to transition into our usual first segment. Thanks for the cut, which you guys know already. The process of making a diamond, it does not happen overnight. You know, you literally start off as a piece of coal, as a piece of rock that nobody values. Extreme heat, extreme pressure. You get cut and cut and cut, and then you become this amazing diamond. So this is the process that we go through all the time. I think it'd be great if you could share one of your recent cuts first, and then I'll jump in after.
Yeah. So I was thinking about it because there's so many. It's I'm spoiled for choice. I would say the biggest one I keep making the same mistake over and over again is estimating how long something will take.
oh man,
I'm done. Shut it off. It's done.
It's just one of those things where okay, now the way I see it is, let's say you're doing a good sized project and you want to optimistically do it in 12 months. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would assume it will take 24 months. But I don't want to say 24 months to myself, because that would make me do it much slower, right? And then I will still miss 24 months. So I would give myself maybe 18 months and say, look, 18 months is realistic. You'll probably not make it, but at least you'll stretch yourself. But don't make it as if everything will go right. So 12 months is if everything you ever have a dependency on goes perfectly and you make zero mistakes in that whole process. It's 12 months. So that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
There is one example where it did happen, which is WordPress.
Okay.
So WordPress was written as code by one guy who did not have a normal sleeping pattern for 2 years.
Wow.
So he did actually reset his entire body clock and did nothing but write WordPress. He had no external dependencies, and except for him not getting ill. And he did build it in 24 months.
it reminds me of someone on our team whose working pattern is very similar and does web development for us.
Yeah, literally, we have someone on our
true.
team who is exactly like that.
That, to me, is the only exception I've ever seen to this rule. So yeah, I would say my biggest mistake over and over again over the years, either in corporate or in startup, has always been underestimating how long something will take, because we're like, oh, we're going to do this really overnight, and then never ever reaching that goal. And also you feel like you want to do more when you get to that end, like I want to make the product better. So I would always say that if you think it will take X, do 1.5X.
I like that. That's a nice little formula. That's really practical as well. I think that's really practical. So you guys didn't catch that. You know, if you think it will take X amount of time, assume 1.5X. That's interesting. I was listening to something recently and they asked an entrepreneur, you know, like, what would you recommend for someone who's starting? And he said, literally, just assume it's going to take 3 times the amount of money you think it's going to take. Assume it's going to take 3 times the amount of time. The money thing was based on the time, though.
Yeah.
It was based on you thought you'd need enough money in the bank to be able to survive for the next year, maybe with no income. Really, you need to plan for 3 years. And it's also like, you know, really, really cliche, but that quote that we often hear from Tony Robbins, which is that most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year, but underestimate what they can do in 10. And that's it. Sometimes people say, oh yeah, no, like that's not realistic to happen in 10 years. But if you have consistent momentum and you do grow exponentially, 10 years, you'll probably bypass what you thought you could. So yeah, that's huge. Thank you for sharing, definitely. And I'll share a cut as well. And mine was pretty interesting. And it's like, we've been speaking in the last couple of days and you've been asking me like, why was my experience on Wednesday so deep? So this Wednesday that just passed, we were delivering some workshops with the Medway Youth Trust, who is an amazing charity that we've recently partnered with to deliver workshops for their young people who are currently not in employment, education or training. And, you know, for me, young people in that situation, that's just a category, that's just a status, that's a temporary thing, you know? That doesn't define them as people, doesn't define them in terms of where they're going. But you can tell that when you come across young people who are in that situation, sometimes they personally feel as if that label degrades them in many ways. And sometimes they feel as if that's it for them. You know, if I'm not in employment, education or training now, whilst a lot of my friends or peers are, they almost feel as if they're less worthy. And that was one of the things I really wanted to try and combat, challenge, and hopefully get them to start thinking differently about when I was there on Wednesday. And the cut for me was that the morning group I had, amazing. So there was 5 young people who, again, they are neat. They've been on the program, I think it's about 3 or 4 weeks now. And they were just a brilliant group, like really mature, you know, like they were just, I was sitting there going like, some of these guys are going to be real assets to our society, you know. And then you had an afternoon group who were not necessarily taken to it in the same way. They weren't taken to the tasks I was setting, the activities I was trying to get them to do and things. And not because they weren't, like they wanted to do it, but they just had a very negative outlook when asked to do it. So it's kind of like, I get what you're trying to do, but that won't work for me. And it was like, why is that your first response? And, you know, all of them had various different reasons. Some of it was family-based. Some of it was like they don't have the right role models and things like that. The cut for me, though, was that what I needed to do was I actually requested from the staff who were the ones bringing us in sort of like what I wanted to know about the group beforehand. One of the staff gave me a really detailed insight into each individual person that was on the program. The other one kind of just gave me one line on each, like this one's great, 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 this one's great. And I was like, I kind of took it for granted. I was like, do you know what? That wasn't exactly what I was looking for, but it's okay. I'll carry on anyway. Do you know what I mean? Like I can deal with it. But what I really should have done was probed a bit more and said, okay, but what about learning styles? You know, what about their attention to work? What about their focus? Because what actually ended up happening was with the afternoon group where I was looking to replicate what I had done in the morning, I actually ended up halfway through completely changing it. And said, we're not going to do the activities I planned. I'm going to do something completely different, something that's really practical, you know, creating stuff using all the different resources we have in the room, because I think that will help them take to it more. But the cut for me was like them sitting there and having those little off comments where they're like, this is rubbish. Like we got told we was going to have a half day and then now we're here in the classroom doing what? And it was like, I had to be able to not take that personally, but realize that was actually because they felt as if they'd been let down in some way, and they were so used to being let down. When you heard some of their personal stories, they're so used to being let down that it was now a case of me being able to say, do you know what, don't take that personally. Realize that this is about you now facilitating a situation where you don't want to let these guys down. Fortunately enough, I managed to do that, and a lot of them came away saying like, you're the first person that's actually made me respond in this way, and I'm really grateful for that. But it was one of those things where I could very easily just sat there and gone, they let me down. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, that was the cut for me. Do you know what I mean? And we'll talk more about this.
Oh man, this is the first time I'm hearing this because we haven't had a chance to catch up since then. That's awesome, because I think sometimes one of the things that I disagree with is that label that people give young people of they are hard to reach.
You just can't reach them.
Exactly. And I love that I respect and I'm inspired actually that you responded in that way instead of reacting of, okay, thanks for the cut. What can I do now to make sure that I'm adaptive to what their needs are, and then just changing that up, because you could have easily stuck to it and said, no, they need to fit my box.
Yeah.
But that's where, as a facilitator, obviously you need to do that. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So
let's go into this topic, man.
Okay.
I'm excited.
So as you guys know, the election is coming up and you're about to vote in a couple of days. So we decided that, you know, thinking about everything that's happening, all the stories that are coming out right now, the policies, the personalities, the fake news, the ideas, the truths, whatever. what are some of the main mistakes that people make when it comes to voting in the general election? So that's our main topic of discussion today. So I know that we had a really, really interesting discussion the other day about this, that you were talking about, personality and policy.
Yeah.
So do you want to start us off with that?
Do you know, I'm very tempted to bring this to you, though, Jessica. I feel like you've been quiet so far, but I know when Jessica speaks, I literally, what you guys can't see is behind my chair there is a notepad and pen. Yeah, there is literally I'm literally ready. Do you get what I'm saying? But no, personality and policy, I think that's an interesting one. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think it was a conversation we were having about how the media has purposely decided to focus this election not on manifestos, not on what the policies are that these different parties plan to implement, but more on the individuals that lead the different parties. And, for example, when we look at how they're currently framing Jeremy Corbyn and saying, he's fairly weak in many ways. There's even things saying that he's not got support of his own party. Well, if we say men lie, women lie, numbers don't lie, the guy got elected twice as leader of his party, and the second time with more votes than he had the first time. So there's clearly some level of support from his own party. And then on the other side, you've got things like they're branding Theresa May as the one that's strong, as the one that is really going to be able to lead us. So for me, it's like, no disrespect, but the leader, I'm not going to say is irrelevant, but is actually not as important, in my opinion, as what they plan to implement and how their party is going to support them with that, and also how their party is going to go about working with other institutions, organizations, groups and individuals within our society to bring about the changes they want to make. Because we would be foolish to think that one person is going to change everything for us, and not being biased here, but I did recently see a video of Jeremy Corbyn where he was sitting with JME, which I thought was just genius. And JME tried to give him a compliment, and he said, you're for the first time I'm going to vote because I see you as someone that I actually think could do something good for this country. And Jeremy Corbyn said, yeah, but not all social change comes from politicians. And that to me was like, what does that tell you? That tells you that he is aware that he as an individual is not going to be even a drop in the water to bring about the change that even he would like to make. So for me, that's it. Sometimes as people, we go with what the media shows us. And if we get drawn to just the personality, but don't actually look at policy and how they plan the strategy to back up bringing that policy into effect, then we're going to get done as we always do. We have to start thinking a lot more critically than that. But yeah, Jessica, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share?
Well, you used the word brand in there, and I think that's a pretty key one. I think, PR spin when it comes to politics is a big thing. So I think it's important to obviously look at the policies, but even look at the history of the person. Because if you look at Jeremy Corbyn's track record, then that will tell you about him as a person, as it will with any of the candidates. So the individual does matter, but being aware that it is a brand at the end of the day, and there is a huge spin around that. And also, who owns the media? So do your own research.
A big smile there, because he's got a workshop that we run regularly that he loves. But go on.
Well, yeah, I think having a discussion, I think one of the things is so many people I know don't feel educated enough to talk about it. And even I don't feel educated enough to talk about it because I don't know all the policies. But you can tell Jeremy Corbyn is capturing something that other politicians haven't. And I think people feel his sincerity. And I think he's challenging the mode of how a political party is run. And it's shaking things up a bit. So it's quite interesting to see.
That's why I was excited for you to jump into this conversation, Can we quote that? We're going to make a quote card out of that. He's challenging the mode of how political parties meant to be. I love that.
So I guess the thing that I wanted to add in here is, don't just vote based on personality, vote based on policy, but also there's a big difference between your local MP and what's going on in your constituency and what's happening at a national level. Even, to take the example of Corbyn, if you're living in Manchester, you might want to see what your MP there is saying in difference to what Corbyn is talking about. And, there's MPs who are part of the Labour Party who are not really promoting what Corbyn's talking about, but are just talking about at a local level, on the road, on the main high street, there's so much rubbish being dumped, and we've got a problem of pollution, and we've got a problem of food wastage, and that's the main policy that you're voting for, because it is your local MP that you're voting for who is part of that party. So I think that's another mistake that people make, that, you know, I've made in the past as well, is not actually looking into, okay, what's the leader of the party talking about? What's their manifesto talking about? What are the policies they're looking to implement? But also, what's my local MP's track record, and what are they talking about? And actually going and speaking to them, because they hold open surgeries where you can go and discuss, you know, there's a pothole on my road, can you get rid of it? But also, what's happening with policing, because there's a lot of crime in my neighborhood. But I'm curious about your experience, because I know this is an area that you've got a lot of insight in.
Yeah, I mean, so because I spent a good few years in the public sector as an advisor, it's ingrained into me to see beyond party, because obviously when you're in the civil service, you serve the country, and you do everything that is in the best interest of the country.
Just for the benefit of anyone who's watching, what was your role? What is a civil servant? Just really quickly.
So I used to work in Deloitte, which is a very big consulting firm, and one of their sectors is public sector. So what would happen is, let's take a very simple project like the now Santander bikes, used to be Barclay bikes, yeah. So someone like the Mayor of London would come to a company like Deloitte and say, hey, look, we need to bring more cycles into the city, you know, let's make it happen. Because it's not something that the government will know how to do. It's not something they will have done, right? So they will hire a company who will have experience having done that in Asia, in Europe, in US, and getting the best of class knowledge and bringing that for London, yeah? So my projects were like more on the security side, because that's my background. So counterterrorism, defense, airport security. But at the basic level, they all are same in essence, is you look at what is best for the country and then recommend that. And obviously the ministers have to approve it. And once it's approved, there's budget, you make it happen. Yeah. Just like, or a very big project would be Olympics. You know, a project we use every day, BBC iPlayer. So all of these are projects that come up as an idea, like let's do something that hasn't existed before, which will genuinely add value to people's lives. Yeah. So the way I see election is, like you said, is about what you want for the country, right? And it totally transcends parties, genuinely, because it is very similar to Yes Minister in a way as to what actually happens behind the scenes in civil service. Because civil servants are genuinely dedicated to lifelong commitment to, unlike consultants, you know, consultants come and go, but civil servants are there for life to build up the country. Just like consultants, ministers come and go, parties change, you know, every 5 years. So you see it from behind the scenes, how civil servants are there to manage the ministers, yeah, because ministers come and go. And there's a balance that has to be maintained where, like you said, the PR is really what the politicians are about, because without the right PR, they will not get the votes, and that's just the job, right? You are the spokesperson for that department, and as spokesperson, you have to look a certain way, you have to talk a certain way, you have to be seen in certain places, and that's completely fine. And then there is the people who are behind the scenes in the department who are making it happen, right? So the way I see elections is, if you want a certain direction for the country, there will be a bunch of parties who will take you in that direction, and there will be a bunch of parties who will take you in the opposite direction. So it's not even at party level, it's more at a tactical level. Yeah, if you want a certain direction for the country, you vote for the candidate who is most likely to win in your constituency, who will then add to the pool of people who will take it in that direction. So, and it might actually mean you vote for different parties in different constituencies, irrespective of the leader you like. Yeah, because there will be a bunch of people who will have a direction, and because it's first past the post, the MP that you vote for in your borough will add to that pool, who will then make the government, who will then drive the country in a certain direction. So that's how I see it when it comes to elections. It's not even party or politics or leaders. it's the direction that you want your 5 years to be.
Definitely. And that was a whistle-stop tour into how the political system works from a local to a regional to a national level. So thank you very much for sharing that. I think there's been two very, very key takeaways already around that concept of analysing what we're being fed from the viewpoint of whether we're being fed the personality or the policies. And then we've also got that concept of looking at whether you're engaging with solely national level politics, or are you also looking at what's going to happen on a local level, because your local MP actually has a lot. And I hold my hands up, that's one of the things that this election in particular has caused me to really open my eyes and see, is that, Lewis, you're not engaging with any local politics. Like, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's because I've always had that mindset of, like, I'll be all right, I'll make things happen regardless. But at the end of the day, that's actually almost contradictory to what I'm saying I believe. And I think that brings me nicely onto a third point, which I'd like to raise, which is, in you guys' opinions, all three of you, what do people do after? Because what I don't want is for people to think, okay, I've casted my vote, that's it, it's done. You guys in that big brown house, carry on, do what you need to do. What do we expect of people after? What we recommend to people with regards to the fact that this is not the end? Once you cast that vote, if anything, that's the start. So how do we go about ensuring that we can maintain that momentum and that interest in politics at all levels, local, regional, national, to ensure that we are actually getting what we're saying we are supporting?
I think I want to jump in here because often it's kind of like comic relief or donating to charity, right? We donate our £2 per month to the poor African kid far away, and then we feel like we've washed our hands of it, we've done our altruistic bit, and that kind of sometimes gives people the license to then exit that issue and feel like, yeah, they've contributed something, they've done what they can, which I understand. We're busy people, there's a lot of information to take in, and it's difficult to get what's truth and not truth. But I think that one of the mistakes that people make is not using that as a moment to engage more rather than exit. And to go back to your question, how can people engage more? I think it's about asking more questions and thinking about, well, you said you were going to do this. What happened to that policy? Or at a local level, what happened? How are things evolving? Because those are the things that are the most important, in a lot of ways. And it's not that Corbyn is going to lead us in a certain direction. It's that we need to lead Corbyn or Theresa May or whoever the person is in power. And you might, you were talking about brand. There's a brand around political leaders, but there's also a brand around parties where you have voters who will vote just based on, I've always been a Conservative voter, so I'm going to vote Conservative.
Yeah, that's it.
But, there's a big difference between Margaret Thatcher and Theresa May and, all the other leaders who've come in between, David Cameron included, Boris Johnson, if he becomes, hopefully not, Prime Minister one day, because they all have different kind of nuances and beliefs and will lead the party in different directions, as we've seen, with Jeremy Corbyn and Tony Blair and, Gordon Brown. So for me, it's about using it as a moment to engage more and seeing it as just because you ticked a box in that poll, it's not over at that point.
Yeah.
It's not over. That's the moment where you need to go deeper and then walk out of that room, wherever it is you're voting, and make sure you get everyone in, your circle to vote, but also ask questions and look at things more critically, so that come June the 9th, whatever the result is, we're still asking questions, because this definitely is, we say this every election, but I do think that this is a big moment for British politics, but also British society, because we're asking a lot of questions about what does it mean to be British? Like, where do we want to go as a nation and a country? So for me, it's about seeing that, you haven't just done your bit and you're done. Like, no, we need more of that and engage more, because like we have to be the heroes that we seek.
I think especially because a lot of the language at the moment is divisive. So actually getting out there and it, when it comes to expecting people to be engaged, so many people aren't, and I don't blame them, because there is a sense of feeling disempowered. And I do think that's something that Jeremy Corbyn has been able to change. So, getting involved on a local level, I think, is a great place to start and see how it plays out locally.
Yeah.
And connecting with one another again, because ultimately that's what it's about.
100%. Yeah. Definitely. Did you want to feed in as well?
Yes, so this is an interesting one, because obviously after the Brexit vote, suddenly people became a lot more involved in political discussions. So I can totally remember that even during the Scottish referendum, it was like a overnight thing, and everyone forgot about it the next morning. Yeah. Obviously, if it had gone the other way, it would have changed everything. But I think one of the things that I have at least realized since the Brexit vote is the huge disparity in our understanding of the rest of England sitting in London. And I mean, most of London voted to remain, but what they didn't realize is that they live in a bubble, and they were shocked that so many people voted to leave. And it's only when you start to talk to people from outside London who you have known from before and have voted to leave, and they're perfectly normal people, and you know, they're friends and they're lovely guys and girls, and then you start to understand why.
Yeah, because they ain't seen the Eurostar. That's why they they ain't seen the Eurostar. You know? No, sorry, go.
So I think
mega bus and all that. You know what I'm saying?
For me, the biggest takeaway from that was just starting to appreciate England as a nation. UK is much more complicated as a collection of nations, but even England as a nation is so diverse, and a good parliament would genuinely see beyond London and try to make England better overall, and hopefully do it with a very close relationship with the Europe, because you know, we will always physically be part of it, right? But also appreciating the why behind the vote, which personally I see as a protest vote for all that has happened over, say, the last 8 years of austerity. And the best interview I've ever read about this was someone from a steel town in Wales, and they said that if they hadn't voted to leave, the next morning people would have woken up, it would have been Remain, and everything would have gone back to normal, and nothing would have changed. And that is not a good outcome for them.
Fair enough. Very much fair enough.
You know, one of the things that I found interesting after the referendum, and on a personal level, but I feel like it's representative of the broader picture, was I went back down to Sussex, where I'm from, and I was having a conversation with a friend who told me that he had voted to leave, and that really surprised me. But what surprised me even more was my reaction, that I was not able to engage in a conversation where we could really discuss it properly. I found myself just getting really angry with him and saying, we're going to have to stop because I'm going to get angry.
Friendship terminated.
But I feel like that's representative of the whole, because if we can't engage in these discussions, and we can't, you know, we're, like you say, in London, we're in a little bubble. And if we can't have conversations with people who have a different view to us, then how can we work through this? And I feel like that's a really big issue at the moment.
But hats off to you, though, for the fact that you actually looked at yourself in that situation, because I think what party politics and the politics that we see in the media doesn't allow us to realize how important it is to take on board those different perspectives. And it does make us think that if someone has a different viewpoint to you, then the whole aim of politics is to either discredit them or just disregard them. And what you've done there is actually said, hold on, I need to look at myself and think about why am I responding in this way, and that's very mature. And not to say that those politicians in the house aren't mature, although I do think I'm mature than most of them. But anyway, now I'm just being real. Some of them are just soft.
I think it also relates to something we've talked about before, which is most people listen to respond rather than listen to understand.
Shout out Coyote Column.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to Coyote for that one.
Definitely. But I know you had I mean, we're strapped for time.
Yeah, we are.
These are two very busy people who are, you know, have blessed us with their time. You had a social reform fail of the week.
I did.
That you wanted to see
so
what actually was.
This week, actually, Jessica's going to share a social reform fail of the week in relation to gender equality in the workplace, which I know is something that we're all passionate about here, but you had a really interesting thing that you wanted to share.
Yeah, and this is very much based upon, it is my view. So talking about gender equality in the workplace and how, as a woman working in business, how I think that I can use my position to contribute more positively towards that aim. It's really tempting to try and adopt the male traits that are recognised as strengths, or the more masculine, I should say, talking about it, masculinity and femininity. And I think there's a danger to think that if you adopt those, that's going to that will lead to success in the short term. But actually embracing my own femininity and what that means in the business context, and using that as my strength rather than trying that makes sense.
What does that look like for you? You know, how have you kind of, because obviously I think it's also a lot about self-awareness. You know, masculinity for me and Lewis and yourself is different, and you know, it's about also finding your own way of expressing that. So I'd assume it's also the same, you know, for you. So how have you kind of implemented that, or in your own professional career?
I think that's things like, you know, women is typically less assertive or wanting to give their opinion, or we have different we tend to be more collaborative than competitive, tend to think of things more holistically, so it's just learning those strengths, or learning that actually no, you don't have to try and be like the guys, and the guys are great but the girls are great too, and it's kind of just feeling strong in your own natural strengths.
That's a really powerful one.
Amazing. That is true. And you know what? And I think now that you've said it, I've almost started going back through my career and looking at all of the women who I've seen that actually I've really, because I've got this thing where I truly believe within, you know, so away from Revolution Hive, with my other business, I truly believe that my first 3 hires will all be women. And I just because of the way I am as a person and where I want to go, I just genuinely think that I would work better with women. Like, and I think they would do so much more for my organization. And that's not being, you know, I'm not being sexist here, but I just think that I would. But again, I could be proven wrong. But it just made me go back through my career and think about all of the women who I admired and thought were really strong, but not because they adopted masculine traits. And so now that you've said it made me go, wow, that's so true, you know? Like, so yeah, no, thank you for sharing. Honestly, that's
there is a business case for it as well, by the way. It's not just my opinion. It is shown that if there's a woman in a team, that they perform more effectively. I mean, I'm sure you'll have personal experience of this. So it's beyond just my opinion.
No, there's massive amounts of research.
And you know what annoys me? Like, genuinely annoys me, is that why do you need to make a case for that? Like, why is it that we have to actually research that?
No, but there's so much research.
Like, I don't know of a study that says, oh, this is why you need men on your team. And that the fact that was commissioned and that had to be done just shows that there is in the workplace that gender pay gap and all those different things which happen both at a micro level but at a macro level, like you're talking about.
And I know it's been a few months, but we saw it in the US on International Women's Day, and we saw that State Street Global, who obviously are like one of the world's leading asset management firms, and they wrote a letter to the companies that are on the Russell Group Index. So that's about 300 or so companies. Over a quarter of those companies don't have a woman on their board. And they said, you guys need to increase equality and diversity in your board, because right now it's disgusting. And they said, and if we don't start seeing that, then there are going to be implications, because, you know, they just want to put pressure on more people to have that. And they're like, despite the fact that there is all this research that clearly shows the value of that, and you just don't have it. So yeah, no, that's huge. That's huge. We're gonna have to go into Build the Buzz.
Yeah, because I know that we'll definitely talk more outside.
Yeah, we will, without a doubt.
We need to go for a coffee, but as you guys know,
Sharon as well, if you do that one, you know what I'm saying?
As you guys know, so the final segment of the show is Build the Buzz, where we answer your questions for both ourselves but also the guests that are coming on the show. So if you do want to send in your questions, comment down below with the hashtag Build the Buzz, or tweet us at Revolution Hive. Send us an email, education@revolutionhive.com. Myself and Lewis will personally respond to you. So today we've got a very, very interesting question from a 17-year-old entrepreneur. So first of all, I just want to celebrate that, because there are young people who are very active and doing things and changing the paradigm. So I think probably the two of you will be able to answer this really well, given, you know, your respective experience. This is from Graham from Leeds. Thanks for your question, Graham. He says, I'm running my first social business, which is an app for graduates in the UK to find out which career suits them best. I'm looking for support and investment, and I know lots of other people are as well. So based on your experience, what are the top 3 mistakes that I should watch out for that most people make? So yeah, I don't know which one of you wants to go first, but...
First of all, it's a brilliant idea. I think it does make a lot of sense. Building something that you would use as a user, and a lot of people actually would find value. Like, the way I would see it is you put in your skills and your preferences, and it starts to recommend what kind of jobs you might be interested in, which is actually quite confusing at when you're just leaving school. So I would say the biggest thing for me is don't raise money unless you absolutely have to, because it comes with a lot of strings, right? And especially, like say in this case, the app, you're probably building it yourself, so all you need is your time, right? Which is very valuable to you, but it doesn't cost much money. And when it comes to getting it out there, that's when you can spend a lot of money, big marketing, or you could just go, door to door in the student dorms.
Yeah. No. Open a Play Store.
Yeah, literally.
Or tie up with the careers office in the university and say, hey, look, my app is ready. Do you just want to tell people to start using it, right? And then just like Facebook started with Harvard and nothing else. And if you do one thing really, really well, you just do one university, your university really, really well, and everyone just loves it, then it will automatically spread because that's just the product network effect. And then when it spreads, money will come to you, and that's the best money, right? And then you can pick and choose the investors, and they become your best advisors.
So I guess what you're saying is that kind of like that lean startup methodology: build, measure, learn, but start on a very micro scale, do it really well. And I know I've made that mistake in the past of trying to grow too quickly, trying to get to every school in Birmingham. Just do one, and really make sure that you deliver value to the students, that you've got your impact measurement down. So the same for this app, like really build that to the highest level possible, get that prototype well, and then scale up slowly, because people underestimate the importance of stability.
And a good example was a news app called Sumly. It was done by a very young student, probably in his late teens, and he did a really, really good job of building it. And then people would just come to him saying, please take my money. Like Stephen Fry started talking about it. He got investment from the guy who owns 3, the phone company, and eventually got acquired by Yahoo, and I think he's 21 now. So
it's not bad.
It's
not bad to have in your CV at 21, is it?
And what you were saying, young people are disengaged, yeah?
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
But all he did was make the app incredibly well, and probably by himself most of it. It made it really, really well, and then focused on getting it in a specific area.
Excellent tip. Yeah, thank you. Jessica, what about from your experience? Because I know you work with a lot of social ventures that are pitching to you, and there's all. I know that in the session that when we first met, you were talking about musts and shoulds and things like that.
I think to go back a step, make sure you do your market research and look at what else is out there, because if you're going to put your energy into something and then you find out there's 5 out there already, then it's going to be more challenging. So do your market research, think about what's missing and what's going to be your USP, so your unique selling point, and then go out there and network, go and speak to people and find out, learn from people who've made mistakes so you don't have to make them. And then think about the stakeholders that you're going to need to engage with, so those people are going to be using it. And as you're building it, test it with them. So you're refining it as you're building it and amending it as you go along, so you don't build something and then go back and find out that actually it doesn't work for them. So then it's going to make it easier when it does come to try and get users on board. And then I think if it's a social or impact business and you're doing something great, then people are going to want to be involved. So take advantage of that and build a great team around you. So those are 3 things I'd say.
This is golden stuff, Genuinely, we should be paying for this. We should be paying for this. I'm saying,
I'm sure that you've got one as well, Lou. So,
for me personally, if I was in his position, if I'm being 100% open and honest, and this is going to sound again like so obvious, but I would really hone in on what makes me different. And I think I'm saying that because when I think of the different organizations that already exist, companies, whether they be tech or non-tech, there are a lot of people that are doing that when it comes to trying to support graduates with finding entry-level jobs. And if I'm 100% open and honest, even part of what my business does is that. So I'm sitting there and I'm going like, what makes you so different? So I would genuinely focus on USP if I was him. And then look at how he's going to go, because there's going to be, and this is going to be like really specific to him, so this is not a common mistake, but if I was him, I'd really focus on like what's going to give me an asset And if I'm honest, he needs high numbers of students that are on that platform. That's the only way for him to build an asset that's going to be able to drive revenue for that business. Because I'm assuming the revenue comes from companies either paying when they put on some form of job description, or maybe it's that he gets revenue through, I don't know if it's advertising, but he needs users. So he needs to really think about how he's going to do that. And he may go about trying to use some sort of growth hacking technique, who knows? But he really does need to focus on his asset is going to be those students. So he's got to really focus on that.
So I can quickly jump in there. So that reminds me of what Airbnb did to scale their company when they were really, really young. So they scraped the whole of Craigslist. And again, they focused just on one place, which is New York, and nothing else. They were like, we're going to crack New York and we'll build our product. We'll make it really good. And every New Yorker will love it. And then we'll leave New York, yeah? So they scraped every single listing on Craigslist. And when a person would land on Airbnb, they would have, say, 10,000 rooms to choose from. So this is a concept called supply before demand.
Yeah.
So if you just flood it with supply,
That's it.
even when there's no demand, when the first demand comes, they just think it's incredible website, incredible app, incredible organization, and everybody's on it. So it must be amazing, right?
That's it.
And that network effect just grows.
You know, and I heard a stat last year, and it probably still exists now, but like, this is why I'm so jealous of people with tech companies. But, you know, I'm not one of those people that like to focus on valuation, because I truly believe in, but how many sales do you make? But with a tech company, 50,000 users, before you've even launched, 50 people pre-subscribed or like pre-registered, automatic 10 million valuation, you know? So tells you something, doesn't it?
So, I mean, in this case, what he could do is figure out how he can get a huge number of job listings, maybe in that region. So let's say in Birmingham, and then there will be a lot of companies out there, and people love posting their jobs for free, right? There's nothing.
Yes, you could give away those.
So you have this huge bank of jobs, and then students will be like, okay, I want to be here because this is Birmingham specific. And that's what the differentiator will be, right? Not just that the skill match is probably quite straightforward, but the fact that there's so much supply of jobs and there is no demand yet, so whoever is the first will have access to this huge database of jobs.
That's it. Second bounce of the ball.
I'm not even going to get into that, but it is a great book, Second Bounce of the Ball by Sir Ronald Cohen. Guys, we are out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys, honestly,
for being on the show today. You've been awesome with your contributions.
so much,
Let me go
Jessica.
over here as well and give you a
Love,
hand,
bro.
as
Love,
always.
bro.
And so just to wrap up, as always, guys, you know, accept only the best and nothing less. And you know the motto: absorb what's useful, discard what isn't, and add what's uniquely your own. And I want you all to jump in the comments right now, and I got a very, very simple question for you. Who are you going to vote for and why? See you guys in the next episode. Peace.